It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. I left work early, itching to take a long drive to clear my head after a grueling morning. The air was crisp, and the sun was setting low, painting everything in a golden hue. I wasn't heading anywhere specific, just driving for the sake of it, trying to shake off the weight of my usual routine. About 10 minutes into my aimless journey, I spotted Laura's car parked on the shoulder of a quiet back road. Her silver sedan was unmistakable. The dent on the rear bumper was from when she backed into a pole last Christmas. First, I assumed she had car trouble. That's what any sane person would think, right? But as I got closer, I saw her standing beside the car. She wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, dark-haired, and far too close. His hands rested on her waist, pulling her toward him. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I slowed down, my heart hammering in my chest. Then it happened. She leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that lasted far longer than it should have. My chest felt like it had been cracked open, my world collapsing in on itself. I couldn't look away, even as I wanted to slam my foot on the accelerator and drive off as fast as possible. The car behind me honked, jolting me back to reality. I pulled over a few feet down the road, parking just out of sight. My pulse was racing, my vision blurring with a mixture of fury and disbelief. This couldn't be real. I watched as they laughed together, their heads tilted close, like they were sharing a private joke. The carefree way she touched his arm, the ease with which she betrayed me. It gutted me. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I confront her right then and there? Should I take a picture as proof? Should I drive away and pretend I didn't see it? Before I could make a decision, the man got into his car, and Laura stood there for a moment, fixing her hair in the reflection of her car window. She looked so calm, so composed, like she wasn't walking back to the home we shared, to the husband she had just betrayed. I waited until she drove off before heading home myself. The entire drive back, I felt like I was suffocating. When Laura walked in later that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and sat down for dinner as though she hadn't just ripped my heart out on the side of the road. "Everything okay?" she asked when she noticed my silence. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired from work." But I wasn't tired. I was furious. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't let her know what I'd seen. Not yet. If she thought she could play me for a fool, I'd play along, just long enough to figure out my next move. I spent the rest of the week pretending everything was normal, even though every time I looked at Laura, I felt a knot in my chest. The betrayal replayed in my mind on an endless loop, her laughing, her kissing him like it was the most natural thing in the world. I needed to know who this guy was. I couldn't just confront her without more details. Not when she'd probably spin some excuse or lie her way out of it. No, I needed proof. That Friday, Laura mentioned she was heading to the gym after work. "I'll be late," she said, her voice casual. "Don't wait up for dinner, okay?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sure, have fun." As soon as she left, I followed her. I know how it sounds, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her keep playing me for a fool. I trailed her car from a safe distance, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. My heart pounded harder with every turn she took, and when she passed the gym without stopping, my suspicions solidified into certainty. She drove to the edge of town, pulling into a diner parking lot. It was one of those hole-in-the-wall places we used to go to in our early days, back when we didn't have much money but were still happy just being together. Seeing her there now, waiting for someone else, felt like a cruel twist of the knife. I parked across the street, far enough away that she wouldn't notice me. A few minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, and the same man I'd seen on the roadside stepped out. He looked polished in a way I wasn't. Designer jacket, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that comes from someone who's used to getting what they want. I watched as he walked into the diner, greeted Laura with a kiss, and slid into the booth across from her. For an hour, I sat there in my car, watching them laugh and flirt through the window. I didn't need to hear what they were saying to know what it meant. Every glance, every touch was another piece of evidence. When they finally left, I tailed them again, my heart pounding so hard I could barely think straight. They drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, and that's when I knew. I snapped a picture of them walking inside together, their bodies close as they disappeared through the door. It was all the proof I needed. That night, when Laura came home, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. She was even humming as she kicked off her shoes. "Good workout?" I asked, my voice steady. "Yeah," she said, heading to the fridge for a glass of water. "Exhausting, though. I might just go to bed early." I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. "You deserve the rest," I said, forcing a smile. She had no idea that I knew. But now I had what I needed to destroy her. I barely slept that night, as Laura snored softly beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I stared at the ceiling and mapped out my next steps. Couldn't just walk away, not yet. She didn't deserve the easy way out, and I wasn't going to let her keep everything we had worked for. The savings in the safe, the house, the cars, those weren't hers alone. I'd broken my back to build this life, and if she wanted to destroy it, she'd have to pay. The next morning, I woke early and headed straight for the garage, where I kept the safe tucked away in a corner under a pile of old tools. It held everything: emergency cash, some jewelry, and the documents that made our life run smoothly: house deeds, car titles, insurance papers. Punching in the code, I opened it and stared at the neatly stacked bundles of cash. Over $40,000, saved up over the years for emergencies or big plans. Well, this was an emergency. I stuffed it all into a duffel bag, my mind racing. Laura came downstairs as I was zipping the bag closed. She yawned, looking at me with a sleepy smile. "What are you up to so early?" "Just cleaning out the garage," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Figured it's about time." She nodded, grabbing her coffee mug. "Don't work too hard," she teased, kissing my cheek before heading to the kitchen. I watched her go. She had no clue what I was planning. No idea that everything she thought was stable was about to crumble beneath her. That afternoon, while Laura was out shopping, I made my first move. I packed the essentials: clothes, my laptop, the duffel bag of cash. I left behind everything else: memories I didn't want, furniture I didn't care about. By the time she got back, I was gone. I left a note on the kitchen counter, simple and direct. Asterisk, don't bother calling. I know everything. Take care of yourself. Asterisk. It wasn't poetic, but it didn't need to be. The real message was the empty safe, the missing cash, and the realization that her cushy little life was about to get a lot harder. I drove for hours, finally stopping in a city far enough away that no one would know me. A cheap motel became my temporary home while I figured out the next steps. But I wasn't done with her yet. If she thought I'd just run and leave her with everything else, the house, the cars, she was sorely mistaken. I had more to do, and if it meant bending the rules, so be it. She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd show her how it's done. I stayed low for a few days, holed up in the motel, avoiding any calls or texts. The only thing I focused on was creating a plan that would leave her with nothing. Laura thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. Not on my watch. The first step was to make her feel the financial strain. Before leaving, I had already transferred most of our joint bank account funds to an account in my name. The savings I took from the safe were just the beginning. She'd find herself locked out of every account we shared and left scrambling to figure out how to pay for her life of lies. But I couldn't stop there. The house, the cars, she wouldn't keep those either. Not when I had years of paperwork to manipulate in my favor. I called in a favor from an old college buddy, Darren, a guy who worked in real estate. He owed me one from years ago when I'd helped him out of a legal mess. Now it was time for payback. "Elliot, what the hell happened?" Darren asked when I explained my situation. "Long story. Let's just say she doesn't deserve what's coming to her," I replied coldly. "I need your help." "What do you need me to do?" "I'm selling the house. She doesn't know it yet, but I'll take care of the paperwork. You just need to find a buyer and move it fast." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do this? It's risky if she—" "I don't care." I cut him off. "She signed the documents years ago, giving me control of the assets. She'll fight it. But by the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. Darren sighed. All right, send me the details and I'll get started. I hung up, feeling a grim satisfaction. Laura had no idea what was coming, and that ignorance would be her downfall. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of carefully calculated moves. I forged signatures where needed, filed transfer papers, and set up a fake trail that made it look like I'd been planning this for months. Laura would think it was all legal by the time she tried to fight it. When I wasn't working on dismantling her financial security, I kept tabs on her. Using a throwaway phone and a social media account she didn't know I had, I followed her every move. It wasn't hard. Laura wasn't exactly discreet. She posted photos of herself out with friends, laughing like nothing was wrong. She even posted a selfie with him, the guy from the roadside, captioned asterisk, grateful for this one. Asterisk. The audacity of it made my blood boil. But it also gave me the confirmation I needed that she hadn't learned a damn thing. The house sold within weeks. Darren found a cash buyer who was happy to pay below market value for a quick sale. The car was trickier. Laura had been using it, so I had to report it stolen, knowing she wouldn't suspect I was behind it. When the repo company came for it, she called me in a panic. Elliot, someone took my car. She cried over the phone, her voice frantic. I could hear the edge of desperation in her tone, and it almost made me smile. I don't know what to tell you, Laura. Maybe Ryan can give you a ride. There was a pause, and I could feel her panic shift to anger. You're a bastard, Elliot. Maybe, I said, my voice cold. But I'm not the one who threw everything away. I hung up before she could respond, her voice still ringing in my ears. It didn't take long for Laura to realize the full extent of what I'd done. The bank accounts were frozen, the house was sold, and the car was gone. She was drowning, and I knew it, but she wasn't as clueless as I thought. One evening, my burner phone lit up with a call from her. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. Elliot, she snapped, her voice sharp and angry. What the hell have you done? I leaned back in my motel chair, smirking. I don't know what you mean, Laura. Don't play games with me, she screamed. The accounts are locked. The house is gone. I can't even pay my credit card bill. How could you do this? How could I do this? I repeated, my voice calm but laced with venom. How could you kiss some guy on the side of the road, walk into a motel with him, and then come home and act like everything's fine? Her silence was deafening. For the first time, she had no quick response, no excuse ready to throw in my face. That's what I thought, I continued. Don't you dare try to pin this on me. You did this, Laura. You threw everything away the second you decided to betray me. You're insane, she said finally, her voice shaking. You're going to ruin both of us. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'll be just fine. You, on the other hand? Good luck keeping that little love affair going when you can't even afford a motel room. Elliot, please, she said, her tone shifting to something almost pleading. We can fix this. We can work through it. I clenched my jaw, the audacity of her words almost making me lose my cool. Fix this? You think I'd take you back after everything you've done?
No, Laura.
I hung up, slamming the phone onto the table. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from anger or adrenaline. The next morning, I got an email from her lawyer. She was filing for a formal separation and demanded an explanation for the missing money. I expected this, but I wasn't about to let her pin me down. That afternoon, I met with my own lawyer, a sharp and ruthless woman named Monica I'd hired after the first night at the motel. She had one goal: make sure Laura ended up with nothing. She's going to argue financial abuse, Monica said as she flipped through the papers I brought her. Her lawyer is already drafting a subpoena for the missing funds. What do we do? I asked. Monica smiled slyly, leaning back in her chair. We make it look like there's nothing to find. Over the next few weeks, Monica helped me create a series of fraudulent transactions that showed the money had gone toward fake debts, emergency repairs, and investments that conveniently failed. By the time Laura's lawyer tried to push the issue in court, it would look like I'd barely scraped by. She won't have a leg to stand on, Monica said with confidence. Just make sure you stick to the story. Let me handle the rest. As the court date approached, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Laura had no idea that she was walking into a trap, just like she'd set one for me with her lies. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of murmured conversations and shuffling papers as Laura and I sat on opposite sides, separated by years of trust shattered in an instant. She looked composed on the surface, wearing her favorite blazer, the one she always claimed made her feel unstoppable. But I knew her too well. The slight twitch of her left hand, the way she avoided my gaze. She was unraveling beneath the surface. Her lawyer, a man who looked like he'd spent more time in tanning beds than law school, stood and began his opening statement. Your Honor, this is a clear case of financial manipulation and deceit. My client has been left with nothing. No home, no access to her marital funds, and no explanation. We request an immediate accounting of the missing assets and demand that Mr. Grayson be held accountable for his actions. I fought the urge to smirk. They had no idea what they were up against. Monica stood, calm and poised, the picture of unflappable confidence. Your Honor, my client has provided thorough documentation showing that the funds in question were used for legitimate purposes: medical expenses, home repairs, and investment losses. While it's unfortunate that the marriage has ended, there is no evidence to support these baseless accusations of misconduct. The judge nodded, flipping through the thick stack of papers Monica had submitted. Meanwhile, Laura shot me a glare so sharp it could have cut through steel. The next few hours were a blur of testimony and cross-examinations. Laura's lawyer tried to paint me as a deceitful, controlling husband who had systematically dismantled her financial stability. Monica countered every claim with receipts, fake statements, and a timeline that painted me as nothing more than an unlucky man trying to salvage what he could from a failing marriage. When Laura took the stand, she looked nervous. Her lawyer guided her through a series of questions, and she recounted the story of our marriage as though she were the victim. He emptied the accounts without telling me, she said, her voice shaking just enough to seem believable. He sold the house, left me with nothing, and disappeared. I don't even know where he's living now. Monica rose for the cross-examination, her heels clicking against the floor with purpose. Mrs. Grayson, she began, her voice smooth and sharp. Can you explain why my client discovered evidence of an extramarital affair just weeks before these so-called financial manipulations occurred? Laura's eyes widened, and she stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. Monica raised an eyebrow, holding up a printout of a photo. It was the picture I had taken of Laura and her lover walking into the motel. Would you care to explain this? Monica asked, her tone icy. Laura's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This is irrelevant to the financial claims. Your Honor, Monica said smoothly. This speaks directly to the breakdown of the marriage and the motivations behind my client's actions. It is entirely relevant. The judge nodded. Overruled. Mrs. Grayson, answer the question. Laura's face turned bright red as she fumbled for words. It's not what it looks like, she finally muttered. Monica leaned in, her voice cutting like a blade. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like. By the time the session ended, Laura looked defeated. The judge adjourned the court and announced that a decision would be delivered the following week. As I left the courtroom, Laura called out to me, her voice cracking. Elliot, wait. I turned slowly, my expression blank. What do you want, Laura? Her eyes were glassy, pleading. We don't have to do this. We can figure something out. Together. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. We already figured something out, Laura. You made your choice. Now, live with it. The week dragged on, each day ticking by like a countdown to a final judgment. I kept myself busy in my new city, working on ways to ensure that Laura wouldn't have a single chance to reclaim what I'd taken. By the time the court reconvened, I was fully prepared for whatever she and her lawyer might throw at me. The courtroom was quieter this time, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Laura sat on her side of the aisle, her face drawn and pale. She kept glancing at me, as if hoping to catch some hint of remorse or hesitation. She wouldn't find it. The judge entered, and everyone rose. As he settled into his chair, he adjusted his glasses and began speaking. "I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "This case is as much about the dissolution of trust as it is about financial matters. Unfortunately, when a marriage ends, it is not uncommon for emotions to drive decisions that might seem disproportionate. That said, I am here to weigh the facts, not emotions." My fingers curled around the edge of the table as I listened, every muscle in my body tense. "The court finds no evidence of financial abuse on Mr. Grayson's part," the judge continued. "The documentation provided demonstrates legitimate expenditures and losses. As such, there will be no additional financial restitution awarded to Mrs. Grayson beyond the already divided retirement accounts." A small gasp escaped Laura's lips, and her lawyer's face fell. Monica gave me a small, satisfied nod. "Regarding the sale of the marital home, the court acknowledges that the property was legally under Mr. Grayson's sole control, as per the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties. Therefore, Mrs. Grayson's claim to the property is dismissed." Laura shot up from her seat. "What? That's everything I have." "He took it all." The judge glared at her, banging his gavel. "Mrs. Grayson, sit down. You will not disrupt these proceedings." She dropped back into her chair, her hands trembling. I didn't feel a shred of pity for her. The judge turned his attention back to the paperwork in front of him. "Lastly, as for the allegations of infidelity brought forward by Mr. Grayson, while this court does not adjudicate moral failings, the evidence provided indicates a breach of the marital contract, further supporting the legitimacy of Mr. Grayson's actions leading up to this case." It was over. The gavel fell one last time, the sound reverberating in the silent courtroom. "This court is adjourned." I stood slowly, turning to leave, but Laura's voice stopped me. "Elliot, you can't just walk away from this," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "We built this life together. You can't just leave me with nothing." I turned to face her, my expression cold. "We didn't build anything together, Laura. I built it and you destroyed it. Now you get to live with the consequences." Monica tugged on my arm, pulling me toward the door. "Let's go." There's nothing more to say. The days following the verdict were a whirlwind of closure and satisfaction. I finalized the last of my relocation plans, using the funds I'd kept hidden to secure a comfortable new life. Laura, on the other hand, was floundering. I knew because I couldn't resist checking up on her from time to time. Her social media painted a stark picture. Vague posts about betrayal, cryptic cries for help, and a steady decline in the curated image she'd worked so hard to maintain. Ryan, the man she'd thrown everything away for, was nowhere to be seen. A little digging revealed that he'd moved on to someone else. Probably someone who didn't come with as much baggage as Laura now had. Meanwhile, the house was gone, the car repossessed, and the bank accounts drained. She was left renting a shabby apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the comfortable life she once enjoyed. One evening, I got a message from her. It was short, simple, and filled with an air of regret. "I made a mistake. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. My new life was quiet, but it was mine. I used the money from the house and the accounts to buy a small property in a city where no one knew me. I found work in consulting, leveraging my skills to build a modest but stable income. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the suffocating weight of a marriage that had been rotting from the inside out. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about Laura. Not with anger or longing, but with a sense of closure. She'd made her choices and I'd made mine. In the end, she was left with nothing, while I had everything I needed to start over. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, I raised a glass of whiskey to the fading sky and smiled. "Here's to freedom," I murmured to myself, "and to never looking back." Laura's life unraveled faster than even I had anticipated. I hadn't planned to keep tabs on her, but curiosity got the better of me. Every now and then, I'd check her social media accounts or hear updates through mutual acquaintances. The picture painted was one of slow collapse. Her polished exterior, once meticulously maintained, now seemed like a distant memory. Her posts oscillated between cryptic complaints and desperate attempts to appear unaffected. One particularly telling update read, *, life is full of lessons. Some of us learn the hard way. *. Another one, posted just a week later, was even more direct. *, I trusted the wrong people and lost everything. Never again. *. The comments under her posts were a mix of sympathy and confusion, with friends and followers trying to piece together what had happened. Ryan, of course, was long gone by then. He had vanished as quickly as he had appeared in her life, leaving her to deal with the wreckage alone. The most ironic part? Laura still tried to maintain the facade of control, as if she hadn't been left scraping by. She took on odd jobs, downgraded her wardrobe, and started posting motivational quotes about resilience and starting fresh. But anyone who knew her could see the cracks beneath the surface. It wasn't just her finances that had crumbled. It was her reputation, her social standing. Mutual friends began to distance themselves, whispering about the details that had come out during the court proceedings. People love gossip, and Laura had given them plenty to talk about. One night, a number I didn't recognize flashed across my phone screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering, curiosity getting the better of me. "Hello." There was a pause, and then her voice came through the line, hesitant and shaky. "Elliot, it's me." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "What do you want, Laura?" Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But she didn't. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Sorry? For what? For cheating? For lying? For throwing away everything we had?" "All of it," she said quickly. "I know I messed up, Elliot. I was stupid, selfish, and I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "Too late doesn't even begin to cover it, Laura." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't have anyone else to talk to. Ryan's gone. My friends, they've all distanced themselves. I'm alone, Elliot. Completely alone." "That's not my problem," I said coldly. There was a long silence on the other end. When she finally spoke, her tone was desperate. "Please, can we just talk? I know we can't fix what happened, but maybe we can." "Laura," I interrupted, "there's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice and now you're living with it. You wanted Ryan and you got him. I hope it was worth it." "It wasn't," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "It wasn't worth any of it." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to revel in her misery. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. "I'm done, Laura. I'm moving on. You should too." Before she could say anything else, I hung up. Not long after that call, I heard through the grapevine that Laura had tried to appeal the court's decision. She wanted to reopen the case, claiming she'd been manipulated into signing away control of the assets. Monica, always 3 steps ahead, had prepared for this possibility. She shut it down so quickly that Laura's lawyer didn't even bother pursuing it further. "Don't worry," Monica told me during a call. "She doesn't have the resources or the evidence to fight this. It's over." And it was. I made sure of it by finalizing the last loose ends, transferring my remaining funds into anonymous accounts, cutting ties with any lingering connections to Laura, and solidifying my new life in the city. Months later, I happened to run into one of our old mutual friends, Kevin, at a coffee shop. He recognized me instantly, his eyes widening in surprise. "Elliot, I didn't think I'd see you again. How's the new life treating you?" "Good," I said simply, not offering much more. Kevin leaned in, lowering his voice. "You've heard about Laura, right?" I shrugged. "Not much. Why?" He glanced around, as if making sure no one was eavesdropping. "She's not doing well. She's living in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town, barely scraping by. Apparently, She's working part-time at a diner to make ends meet. I raised an eyebrow. A diner? Yeah, Kevin said, nodding. It's sad, honestly. She's a completely different person now. Keeps to herself, doesn't really talk to anyone. I think she regrets everything that happened, but, well, you know how these things go. I nodded, sipping my coffee. She made her choices. Kevin studied me for a moment, as if searching for any sign of lingering bitterness or regret. But there was none. You're really done with her, huh? He asked. Completely, I said without hesitation. That evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new home, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the court battle, the months of uncertainty. It had all been worth it. Laura's life had crumbled under the weight of her own mistakes, while mine had flourished in the absence of her deceit. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, and let out a deep, contented sigh. The day I signed the final divorce papers was unremarkable in every way that mattered. A quiet courthouse. No crowds, no theatrics. Monica sat beside me, her polished demeanor as sharp as ever, ensuring every T was crossed and every I was dotted. Laura wasn't there. She couldn't afford the trip, or maybe she couldn't face me again. Either way, her absence was telling, a final admission of defeat in this saga. As the judge handed me the official decree, I felt a strange weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't joy or triumph, but something simpler. Peace. You're a free man, Monica said as we walked out of the courthouse. Feels good, I replied, slipping the papers into my briefcase. Any plans to celebrate? I smiled faintly. Celebrating is for when you gain something. This was about cutting ties. I think I'll just enjoy the quiet. Monica gave me a knowing nod before heading to her car. As I watched her drive away, I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, the cool breeze brushing against my face. It was over. 2 weeks later, while shopping for groceries in my new city, I had an encounter that felt almost scripted. As I turned a corner into the cereal aisle, I saw her, Laura. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. The confidence, the self-assured air she once carried, was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her clothes looked worn, a stark contrast to the designer outfits she once favored. Her cart was filled with discount items, generic brands I knew she would have scoffed at before. When her eyes met mine, they widened, her hand frozen mid-reach for a box of oatmeal. Elliot, she breathed, her voice shaky. I felt nothing, no anger, no longing, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. Laura, I said simply, giving her a polite nod before turning back to my shopping. Wait, she said, stepping closer. Please? Can we talk? I hesitated, then turned to face her. What's left to say? She swallowed hard, her eyes welling with tears. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was stupid, selfish. I ruined everything, and I know that now. I crossed my arms, keeping my expression neutral. It's a little late for apologies, don't you think? I know, she said quickly. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought Ryan was something he wasn't, and I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I nodded slowly. You're right. You didn't realize. And now it's gone. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I took a step back. Elliot, please. I've hit rock bottom. I've lost everything. My home, my friends, my dignity. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked so utterly broken that a flicker of pity stirred within me. But it was fleeting. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said evenly. But you made your choices, Laura. You had a life, a good life, and you threw it away. That's not on me. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, I never thought you'd leave me like this. I shook my head, a small, humorless laugh escaping me. You didn't think I'd leave? After everything you did? You're lucky I didn't leave sooner. She stood there, her shoulders shaking, as the reality of her situation seemed to sink in. Goodbye, Laura, I said, turning to walk away. Elliot, wait. I didn't. That encounter was the last time I saw Laura. From what I heard later, she eventually moved back to her hometown, where she lived with a relative and worked at a small diner. Meanwhile, my life flourished. I invested the money I'd taken wisely, using it to build a modest but comfortable life in my new city. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was secure. I found a small community of friends, started a consulting business, and rediscovered parts of myself I'd forgotten during my marriage. I even began dating again, though cautiously. Trust didn't come easily after what happened with Laura, but I refused to let her betrayal define the rest of my life. One evening, as I sat on the patio of my new home, watching the sunset with a glass of whiskey in hand, I thought about everything that had led me here. The pain, the anger, the uncertainty. It was all worth it in the end. Laura had been right about one thing. Life is full of lessons. Hers had cost her everything. Mine had given me the clarity to walk away and start over. I raised my glass to the horizon, a small smile tugging at my lips. Here's to freedom, I murmured, and to never looking back. And I didn't.